You know what I loved last week after filming the video of the shadow people and the Hat Man? Not sleeping. So I figured, let's just keep this party going. Today I'm talking about some of the world's most haunted places. Now, I'm only talking about 3 different places this week, but I can definitely make this a multi-video series if that's something that you're interested in. Because let me be honest, there are a ton of places to choose from. So, with that being said, get comfy, snuggle up your cat or dog, and let's get started. Would you enter a tunnel if there was a sign placed directly above it that said, "Stop, Land of the Dead"? What if you knew that that specific tunnel housed the bodies of 6 million people? That's like 3 Taylor Swift concerts worth of people. I'm talking about the Paris catacombs. In Paris, France, there are catacombs that are just floor to ceiling skeletons. Now, these bodies aren't placed like you would imagine because when I first heard that there was a bunch of skeletons, I just assumed that they were all put together, but that's just not the case here. They're formed in a more geometrical shape where you'll have a line of skulls with a bunch of femurs on top to kind of make it more aesthetically pleasing. There's even kind of mounds of body parts that create these sculpture like creations. In the Christian religion, as well as other religions, there is a lot of emphasis on being respectful to deceased bodies. You're supposed to keep them whole and place them together in their final resting place. The Hindus believe in placing the organs back into a person's body after autopsy, where other religions are completely against it. They think you're disrespecting a person's final form and they should just be immediately placed in their burial. Because of the epic dismantling of all of these bodies, there are a lot of stories that the Paris catacombs are quite haunted. In the 18th century, people were buried in communal graves. They basically dug a large hole and they just kind of started to stack bodies on top of each other until the hole is completely filled with, well, bodies. Then they would cover it up. Well, later in France, there became kind of an overcrowding problem. It brought in a lot of people, and well, a lot of people died. So they began to kind of run out of room. So they started overfilling these holes where it would become mounds and they would just stack them and have basically hills of bodies. The largest burial ground in France was the Holy Innocents Cemetery. This burial ground was the home for deceased bodies for over 500 years. You can imagine that they started to run out of space quite quickly. This overcrowding became such an issue. Historian Rosemary Wakeman actually wrote, "Human decomposition mixed with blood and guts of the market with piles of rubbish to form a putrid stench, a dangerous effluence that made an axis of infection and disease." To translate that, it basically means that a living person's trash and all of the deceased body's decomposing parts created this very unsafe experience. It was incredibly vile the way it smelled, as well as dangerous because of all the decay running off into the streets. It began contaminating water supply and making people violently ill. There were people that were having respiratory issues. They were becoming delirious and vomiting all over the place. In 1765, the Paris Parliament said, "Enough is enough. From this point on, any bodies that were to be buried had to be buried outside of the city limits." Workers would begin exhuming bodies at night and kind of just stack them on one big cart and roll them into the catacombs. People who have visited the catacombs swear that they hear disembodied voices calling to them and just tortured screams. A lot of them said that they would never even go back. The space is surrounded by a very narrow tunnel system. You can actually visit the Paris catacombs, but there's only a limited area that which accepts visitors because the surrounding area seems very dangerous. They're very shallow entrances and exits, and it's kind of this big, crazy maze that goes on for miles. Some of the spots are said to flood instantly at any sight of rain. So there's people that have reportedly drowned that have walked off into these areas. In 1990, there was a video discovered in the catacombs of a man exploring the area. He kind of strayed from the usual like attraction where most people are supposed to stay. And all of a sudden, this man starts running and he starts screaming. Like he's either really afraid or lost or even being chased by something. You never see anything in the background, but he's just clearly terrified. He all of a sudden drops his camera and runs off. The camera just kept filming till the battery eventually died. But the man and what happened to him was never figured out. It's still a mystery to this day. In 2004, a group of police officers were also exploring the catacombs. They were also going off in areas that were kind of restricted to public access. They found some pretty unusual things. They found this PA system that was just a constant loop recording of a guard dog barking. They found phone lines and electricity that was being pirated. They found a workshop. They found TVs. They found a movie theater that had seats that were carved from stone found inside of the catacombs. Even stranger, the policeman noticed that when they looked up, they saw a bunch of cameras recording their every move. A few days later, the police arrived with backup to kind of figure out what was going on. They were astonished when they saw everything that they previously found earlier was completely gone. There was one thing left behind, and it was just a note that simply read, "Do not search." A large number of tourists go in and just never walk out. They either pass away or they're just never found again. There's a movie that was inspired by the catacombs called As Above and So Below, and it is pretty scary. I'm not sure what's more terrifying about the Paris catacombs. The fact that it's just long and narrow and I'm so claustrophobic, or that there may be disembodied people looking for their other parts, trying to be whole again. Either way, it's pretty haunting. Would I go to the Paris catacombs? Yes, but I would probably just look in, peek around, and be like, cool, I'm out, because your girl does not like tight spaces. In the outskirts of Mexico, there is an island with a dark and mysterious history. This island isn't what you'd expect. It's not your average touristy island of fun things to do. It actually has a very grim backstory. I'm talking about the Island of the Dolls. Do you have a doll fear? I feel like that's a very common fear. I know a lot of grown men that are just absolutely terrified of dolls. Like they're big tough guys, but you bring them around a doll and no sir, they run. And I don't understand it, but I feel like an island of thousands of them would probably be terrifying to most people. Now there is a specific name for the Island of the Dolls, but I don't want to be disrespectful and butcher it and mispronounce it. I tried a couple times and I I don't I don't know how to say it, and I'm so sorry. But it does translate to the Island of the Dolls. In the 1950s, Don Julian Santana Barrera found himself wanting to live a life of solitude. He basically left his entire family to pursue this. He came to an island, which is actually this really cool floating garden type structure that was built by the Aztecs a really long time ago. So it's not like your average island either. One day, Julian tragically found the body of a young girl face down lying in water. She unfortunately drowned. Julian felt some kind of responsibility and just tremendous guilt that he wasn't able to get to her sooner and save her life, and he really carried that with him. Soon after Julian found this girl's body, a doll washed up in the same exact place he found her. He believed this doll belonged to the little girl and he wanted to kind of honor her. So he hung the doll up on a tree to memorialize the little girl as well as ward off any evil spirits. Soon after this kind gesture, Julian believed that the doll started talking to him. He began coming unraveled. People that knew him thought he just was never the same and he was completely changing. Julian began so desperately rummaging through garbage and trash to find old discarded toys that he could collect. One doll turned into a dozen doll turned into 100 dolls, and by today's counts, the dolls around the island are up to the thousands. They're all strung along string, all kind of intertwining through the island. Julian collected these dolls for over 50 years. One day, Julian's nephew, Anastasia, came to visit his uncle to help him around with chores and gardening, and he tragically found his uncle passed away. Now, it was tragic enough the way he found him, but Julian was lying face down in the same body of water that he found the little girl decades earlier. Julian's nephew ended up moving to the island to take care of it. He claims the dolls are possessed by something completely sinister. He feels like there's no good energy surrounding those dolls. The dolls are said to whisper, their heads are said to move as you walk by. Their dead, lifeless eyes look into your soul and follow you as you walk around the island. Anastasia believes that that little girl never left the island, and she, in fact, kind of takes over these dolls and possesses them. He also believes his uncle's still around as he hears the tapping of his cane echoing through the night sky. It is about a 2-hour boat ride to get to this island, and the people that rent out their boats to take tourists there absolutely dread going. They say that they feel like the water surrounding the island is evil and cursed, and they get really bad physical emotions when they're approaching. Some people feel like the dolls kind of lure them in and draw them to the island against their will. One boat operator said after taking some adventurous tours to the island that he began feeling symptoms of possession and he got physically sick and felt like something overtook his body. And it was after a few days of going through that he finally felt like himself again. Julian built this beautiful shrine to this little girl, which is actually a shed. Inside of it, he has a bunch of candles and all of his favorite toys that he's collected, as well as the original doll that he found. And that shed is supposed to contain the most paranormal energy on the entire island. Today, people bring their own offerings to the island to memorialize the little girl as well as Julian. But the people that visit the island feel like it is not a safe place. They see shadowy figures following them. They hear disembodied voices calling for them, tortured souls screaming in pain. Others just feel physically sick even approaching the island. Julian was 80 years old when he passed away, and whether it's from natural causes or finally succumbing to the evils of the dolls is still up for a debate. Would you go to Doll Island? I don't think I would, not because of the dolls, but because of I've seen videos and pictures of Doll Island. There's a lot of spiders. There is a lot of spiders. And your girl, she loves spiders. I'm totally cool with spiders. I think they're actually really fascinating, but the quantity of spiders is going to be a no for me. We went to Paris and then to Mexico. So let's stay local and visit somewhere like Atchison, Kansas, to visit one of the most, if not the most, haunted houses in America. Built in the mid 1800s for a doctor named Charles Finney and his family, Dr. Charles Finney ended up using his house as his place of work. He turned the bottom area into a surgical room, exam rooms, his office, while his family kind of just took up the upstairs. I don't know how I'd feel about being in a house where people are getting operated on, but hey, it's the 1800s. I think anything went. It is said that one day a young mother desperately and frantically entered the doctor's house screaming about her 6-year-old daughter, Sally, and she was said to be in awful abdominal pain. She was doubled over and could not walk. The mom begged Charles to help them both. So Charles laid Sally on the table and realized that she was suffering from appendicitis. He was so concerned that it would burst at any moment that he began operating on Sally. He cut her open before the anesthesia could kick in. Sally started screaming in horrible pain. Suddenly, Sally went quiet. Her body became pale white and she fell limp. Sally died on the operating table. A lot of people speculate that Sally was angry and wanted to seek revenge against the doctor. Others believe that Sally never really was real. Like the story was made up, and it's just this little girl is just a demonic entity that has taken the form of an innocent, pure child. In 1990, Deborah and Tony Pickman took residence in the house. The Pickmans' first few weeks, there was a lot of kind of weird things happening. The lights started to flicker, super classic. Their dog started barking at nothing at the wall. And let me tell you, my dog does this and it freaks me out. And to the point where I'll like get next to him and I'll be like, I see you, ghost. I see you. So then they feel like they've got caught and they leave me alone. The Pickmans had a very young baby and they would start to find the child's toys and stuffed animals arranged in a perfect circle located in the middle of the room. One parent thought it was the work of the other parent, or they were kind of joking with each other. And then they realized that neither parent was doing it. And they would put away the toys and put them back and come back later and find them in the same exact spot. Tony began feeling these really deep scratch marks and he had no idea where they were coming from. One day he started feeling this scratch mark appear and he actually got it on camera as it was coming out. One night, Tony saw the body of a young girl standing at the end of his hallway. She was dressed in really old-timey clothing. He took a sketch of what this little girl looked like and showed his wife. Their daughter, as she got older, around the age of 5, started talking to an imaginary friend named Sally. Sally was mischievous. The little girl would get into trouble all the time, and the little girl would blame it on Sally. Said Sally made her do it. It wasn't her, it was Sally. Later, the Pikmins started experiencing random fires that started out of nowhere, and it just wasn't one or two, it was a constant thing that they were dealing with. And they found out later that they weren't the only ones that dealt with random fires. The two previous owners of the house also said that just a bunch of random fires would start all through the house that they never knew how it got started. Tony would hear scratching in the walls. He thought he had some kind of rodent infestation and had it checked out, and nothing was ever found. The ghost entity demon really did not like Tony. In fact, one night he woke up and the ghost was straddling him and grabbed his wrist. He finally broke free from whatever was going on and noticed that he had these burn marks going all around his wrist where the ghost grabbed him. Later, after the Pickmans moved out, the daughter was talking about her imaginary friend, and she actually came across the drawing that the husband did of the little girl he saw, and she started freaking out. She's like, oh my God, that's Sally. That's my imaginary friend. How did you know? Which is so creepy. After they moved out, they never experienced anything paranormal or out of the ordinary again. Now, there were tenants that moved in after the Pickmans, and A random day, the landlord had to stop over, and it was just kind of like this random family renting the house. And it was like this mom and her husband and the two young kids. And when the landlord got there, he went into the basement and saw something really creepy. He saw this large pentagram that was kind of drawn out in the middle of the basement floor. He saw a bunch of items that were used in rituals and sacrifices. You can actually still see the pentagram mark left on the basement floor today, because the Sally House is now actually an Airbnb where you can stay. So the who's who of ghost hunters have all stayed at the Sally House, and a lot of them have obtained some pretty convincing footage, if you will. Even the ones that don't usually embellish and kind of create their own fake jump scares have had a lot of strange incidents that they got on camera. The Sally House is a paranormal ghost hunter's wet dream. It just seems to have all this weird energy surrounding it. People that have stayed at the Sally House report having these scratch marks that the Pickmans also reported having. One guy talks about waking up in the middle of the night to see this weird creature staring back at him that just reeked of just death. If that happened to me, I think I'm pretty sure I would leave a 1-star review, but I don't know. There were 3 reported deaths at the Sally House from 1872 to 1939. So is it just Sally that's kind of walking the halls, or are there other spirits that are also posting up in this place? Now, would I stay at the Sally House? Well, send me in, coach. I'm ready. I would love to stay at the Sally House. Ghosts don't freak me out. I would love to take up ghost hunting as a hobby. It's something that just has always interested me, just for the fact that what is after, like, what happens after you die? Like, are there other dimensions that we go to? Can we stick around and hang out with loved ones? I'm always drawn to those kind of unanswered questions. So I would love to see me some ghost evidence at the Sally House. It definitely is going on my bucket list for sure. Would you go to any of these locations? Are there any other places that you want me to talk about? Because, like I said, there are so many of them, and I could talk about this all day long. So just want to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate you guys. I really wholeheartedly do. And I just want you to know that you matter, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.